Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Latin Libertarians. I am Martha Bueno, and I am live on the streets of Miami tonight. As we see behind me, a protest for Cuba is going down. Um, you can hear Cubans chanting freedom. And freedom is what they are asking for. Freedom is what they have been asking for since the July 11th protest started in Cuba. And behind us, you can see that they are asking for it. Let me show everyone there. We are in front of Versailles restaurant in Miami-Dade, and there are hundreds of Cubans here coming to protest. Let's go into the people have been chanting here all day. I don't know if you can see that. So what is going on in Cuba? Cubans have been left with no food, no rations ever since, communism. Communism is a big problem in Cuba. And although a lot of Americans believe that it has everything to do with the embargo, the reality is in Cuba, it is the Cuban government that has not allowed Cubans to have access to food, to medicine, or to anything, really. And so here in Miami, where there's the largest diaspora of Cubans in the world, they are out protesting along with Cubans who are on the island in Cuba protesting and have been doing so since July 11th.
Well, hello everybody. Zach Foster here. Lovely coverage we got from Martha over in Little Havana, where lots of Cubans in Florida are riled up. I am coming to you guys from Los Angeles, where I have had a different task for the day, while Martha has been physically with a lot of the Cubans, interviewing them, protesting them with them, trying to inform the world along with them. I have been directly in contact with a number of Cubans on the island, principally members of the Cuban Libertarian Party, and the going has been pretty rough. So far, there are no active arrests that I'm aware of, but this is because the regime played a very different game this time. The July 11th protests caught the regime by surprise, really by surprise, whereas because these protests were announced ahead of time, the regime had plenty of time to prepare, and what they did is fully activated all the police, the military, the revolutionary militias, and every member of the Cuban Libertarian Party that I spoke to today and yesterday has not even been able to leave their front door because they literally have a unit either of police or soldiers or revolutionary militia goons stationed in front of their house. And that's what they're doing all over the island to keep people from leaving their house. And it's absolutely insane. It's full Orwell. Full 1984, full George Orwell. Hello, Martha.
Sorry, Zach, it's really hard to hear out here. It is very loud. Cubans are really loud when they want to protest.
Which section of Little Havana are you at? Are you still in front of Versailles?
Yeah, I'm still in front of Versailles, which is a restaurant that's been here for 50 years. And they are Cuban owned. They actually just celebrated their 50th anniversary this week. And this is the meeting place for Cubans in Miami. And you can tell it is packed behind me. I can't get any closer without it being really loud.
I understand the Versailles has been a long time gathering place for Cubans for many decades. As a matter of fact, The first time I met a lot of people in LP Miami-Dade was at the Versailles restaurant, um, almost 5 years ago.
Yeah, you came down to Miami, Zach. This is the place. This is the place to be. It is. I mean, I can't flip the camera around on this application, but I can tell you there are a few hundred people out here. It is insanity. I haven't been looking at the news, Zach. Do you have any updates from Cuba?
Depends on which city, but all over the country, it's the same thing. Most of the people who are planning on protesting have not been able to protest. There are some people who managed to escape their homes, but they got arrested already. We don't have numbers on how many people have been arrested. So far, nobody in the Cuban LP was arrested, but again, they've had the police in front of their house since yesterday morning. So they were not going to leave their houses anyway. Some members of the Cuban LP already have received citations, which means that they have to appear at a police station within the next couple of days. Lord only knows what the regime's police are going to want to do with them once they go there if they show up. I still don't know what's happening with the children because the regime was saying all kids must go to school on the 15th. And a lot of people said there's no way in hell we're sending our children to school so that the regime can take them hostage or so that they can get caught up in some drama between protesters and the militia. But overall, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about Havana, Camagüey City, Guinness over in Pinar del Rio, over in Holguin province, just everywhere. The only people who are out on the streets are regime people right now. I got to say that again. The only people out on the streets are regime people.
I'm sorry, they're right behind me with cacerolas. They're hitting the pots and pans. It is incredible. So this morning we heard reports of acts of repudiation, acto repudio, on the island. Have you heard any of those, Zach? There was famously Saily Gonzalez. Saily is part of Amarillo y Medio. She woke up at 5 a.m. to have people from the regime sitting in front of her house, yelling things at her, putting music really loud. They actually had a cookout in front of her house to make sure that she couldn't leave. We've heard of several people that were arrested, but what have you been hearing?
Yeah, something really similar. At the particular Cuban LP members that I've spoken with, it's not those people. It's specifically police officers and soldiers because, well, the Cuban LP people have been on the regime's poop list for a long time, but those acts of repudiation, which is these fake counter protests staged by the regimes, that's done by the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution, which is the Communist Party's civilian militia. Most of the time, for example, July 11th, the CDR people were actually in the streets with clubs and they were violently repressing protesters. Whereas this time around, because the police have already had the entire country shut down since yesterday, today they bust into CDR. So instead of giving them riot shields and clubs they had when they were repressing the protesters back in July, this time they're having cookouts in front of people's houses or they're doing counter protests in front of people's houses. Some people, protesters, opposition people, have tried putting protest signs up inside their windows. So then these pro regime people from the CDR, they would take a huge Cuban flag and then just put it up on the person's house to cover up their protest sign on the other side of the glass. So if you see a lot of photos of just Cuban flags very randomly placed on buildings, not necessarily draped in an orderly fashion, but just placed like in the middle of a wall or covering windows, yeah, they're covering people's protest signs.
They did that, in fact, to Junior Garcia. Garcia's his last name? Junior's house. He's one of the main protesters for today, for the 15th of November. He's been in at-home arrest. Our friend JC Mello has also been a subject of house arrest, although he has not been accused of any crimes. It's a sad story in Cuba when you're not convicted of any crimes and yet you're forced into house arrest, as is the case of so many activists. And so
Yeah,
here
poor
at Versailles
William.
today, we've seen Willie Chirino, who is really well-known Cuban singer. He has a very popular song right now, Que Se Vayan. He was seen here along with some commissioners, Commissioner Manolo Reyes and Joe Carollo. Libertarians might remember Joe Carollo as the person who did not help us reopen when Spike Cohen was in Miami. But he's here tonight. I don't think that's a redeeming factor, don't get me wrong, but he is here tonight. I just wanted people to know who he was in case they remember from those days. Um, and so, yeah, here we are with the. It's people just keep arriving, Zach. This is amazing, and I don't know how long this will continue for. But there's definitely no freedom in Cuba just yet. So I think this is going to go on for a little bit longer.
Yeah, the situation, I expect it to deteriorate because remember, it's not like everything is going to be over after today. Remember, the original protest date was November 20th. And because the regime, after they passed a law that said you have to get government permission before you can have a protest, after making that law, the regime, surprise, surprise, said, no, you cannot protest on November 20th. So the people said, all right, then we're just going to protest on November 15th. And then that is when the regime activated all the police, all the armed forces, and all of the revolutionary militias, including the rapid response brigades, the committees for the defense of the revolution, and then two or three other revolutionary groups who are auxiliaries to the armed forces. All of them are having cookouts in front of people's houses or actively repressing the few people who have left their homes. I have seen some people being arrested, but it is incredible because again, all the people out on the streets are regime people. So it'll be some. It kind of reminds me of like in high school, there would be one guy who would go streaking, like in a football game, and then you would see like 30 teachers would chase that guy down. Something real similar to that. You'll see one guy run out of his house dressed in white because white is the official protest colors. One guy hauling ass through the streets dressed in white, and then you'd see not only three different police officers running at him from three different directions, but then you would see a civilian vehicle drive up and like a clown car, three or four police officers get out of the car. Everybody tackles the guy, puts him in the car, and then drives off, and the whole thing is over in less than 10 seconds. I'm telling you, this is full Orwell. Literally the minute that they leave the house, they are swept away by the armed forces, and God knows when they're going to turn up again. Because when some of our libertarian friends got arrested back in July, like in Camagüey City, Marisol, she spent 36 days in the police dungeon before they let her out. 36 days.
Zach, and like her, there's so many mothers in jail currently. There's so many kids. I mean, for us, a 15, 16, 17-year-old, sorry, there's a motorcycle that just showed up and they're playing Willy Chinero.
Uh,
So many 16, 17, 18-year-olds were given up to, well, a year sentence and even more. So the Cuban regime does not put past it to arrest children and mothers, mothers of small children, and they'll just take them from their homes. Months
correct.
after the July 11th protest, they'll still come back, and that's part of the tactic that we're seeing, is that the
That's
Cuban
why a
regime
lot of
needs
a
to
lot of
instill fear
parents just said, "I am
nonstop.
not sending my kids to school today. It's not happening. You're not using my kids as human shields."
I can barely hear you, Zach. Sorry.
I was agreeing with the point that you were just saying. The other reason though why I expect this is going to deteriorate. So today's the 15th. We still have the 20th. The deployments are not going to end today. The regime is going to probably keep the police and the militias and the soldiers deployed at their posts until at least the 20th is over. Maybe for a couple of days afterwards, which means people are going to be shut inside their houses. Every Cuban, if they manage to get food, they've only got food for a couple of days. A lot of Cubans are poor. They don't have refrigerators. Even if they do have refrigerators, they're often without power for several hours or several days at a time. So they only have a couple days worth of perishable foods at a time. If they're stuck there till the 20th, a lot of people are going to be running out of food. And that's what was happening during the last set of lockdowns. That's actually one of the things that triggered the July 11th protests in the first place. Lockdowns to the point where the government just decided, yes, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to starve to death in your house or die of COVID in the hospitals because You know, we got to keep up appearances, and everything's fine in Cuba, and everything is the U.S.'s fault.
That's something that all people, or a lot of people, tell us often, is how it's America's fault that Cuba is the way it is. And here with a whole bunch of other Cubans, we've been discussing this out here actually, and the embargo is not the reason. We're not out here fighting. We're not arguing with the embargo. Sure, you could end the embargo tomorrow. That's not going to end the Cuba regime's hold on its people. In Cuba, people can't fish despite it being an island. Uh,
Yeah.
any food that's produced must be sold to the government at whatever price the government wants. So, you know, I love when
Well,
people tell me that it's the embargo's fault, but it really isn't. Have you been
part
here?
of it is the external embargo, in which Uncle Sam has made it more difficult to do business with Cuban businesses. That's because most Cuban businesses are directly related to the regime. But then there's the internal Cuban embargo, where the government, one day they'll say, "All right, if you stop protesting, we will allow you to bring in as many, humanitarian aid shipments of medicine as you can. We'll let you bring in all that you can bring in." And then a week later, a group like People for Cuba will raise a shipping container's worth of medicine. And then they'll say, okay, a quarter of that, that's all that you can send to Cuba. And then we say, but you said all we can send to Cuba. And they said, yes, exactly. A quarter of what you have right now is all that you can send to Cuba. So do never forget that while Uncle Sam's not helping, the Cuban regime is absolutely starving their own people and killing their own people just by strokes of a pen. But I also wouldn't give Uncle Sam too much of a free pass. You know what? Look behind you, Martha. I'm just going to say it. There is a willing liberation army behind you, but Uncle Sam won't let them go to the land of their birth because.
Zach, it's funny because it's not just the USA at this point. Today, um, Cuban humanitarian activist Rosa Maria Paya was going to fly to Cuba on a private jet with Alex Otaola, and the Cuban government did not allow them to leave the United States with the idea of landing in Cuba. So, we do talk about the United States government quite a bit, not letting us leave, but then the Cuban government also does not let us land there. So people think that it's really easy to get humanitarian aid into Cuba, to be able to make changes in Cuba. The United States doesn't want us to go, and Cuba does not want us to go either. So we really are stuck here at Versailles, hoping that Cubans can fight their way out of the mess that we're in.
Yep, this is absolutely true because they made it clear they are not going to go for any reason. They don't care about the will of the majority of the people. And they have also made it abundantly clear that they will kill however many Cuban citizens as it takes to protect that revolutionary regime. You and I watched with our own eyes videos of people being killed by police special forces during the July 11th protests. And we have seen evidence with our own eyes of how they have already deployed the police and the armed forces and the militias to everybody's neighborhoods so that people cannot even leave their houses. Um, Cuba, it's still a poor country, so they can't afford to have cameras on every corner, but it's still an Orwellian country. So even though they can't afford cameras on every corner, they'll just put a guy on every corner. And in this case, they put 10 or 12 guys on every corner. Like they literally they activated all the soldiers and the police and the repressive forces that they had over what the civilians already said was going to be a peaceful protest for change. But that's the thing, change is off the table. Change is not going to be allowed. Criticism of the regime and how they do things is already not going to be allowed, and it is punishable by civil war started by the regime and by death. It's the worst. It's absolutely the worst.
They are the worst. And I'm really having a hard time hearing at this point. There's a lot of people showing up with their radios full volume. Um, I wanted to also mention that not only did we have Rosa Maria Paya trying to go to Cuba today, but we did have some nuns exit a convent in Cuba today and go protest dressed in white. So um, there's a lot of people protesting, Zach. There's a lot of people protesting this, and they are not waiting for the 20th of November. We're hearing from activists all over Cuba. If it's not today, they'll go out and protest tomorrow. They'll protest the day after. They'll protest the day after that. I think the seal has been broken. There's no putting this back in the bag. I think Cuba isn't going to stop until they are free.
Well, I hope that you are absolutely correct, because those folks deserve freedom. Also, I'm just now getting some news on my phone. What does this text message say? News from the vice president of the Cuban LP. Their secretary just got a knock at the door, and the police gave him a citation. And of course, he took a photo or had somebody take a photo of him with a citation, and then they texted that photo to the VP. The VP texted that to me on an encrypted app. So this guy, the secretary of the Cuban LP, did not leave his house. He did not break the law. All right, he did not leave his house, did not put signs up, but because he's a known dissident from the past, hey, you're gonna have to come to the police station in a couple days. It's absolutely psychotic, but this is what happened, and that is breaking news. I just shared that news with you guys right now as it came into my phone. I have no idea where my partner in crime, Martha's go. Oh, okay. It looks like it got real dark. Oh, there you are. Welcome back.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time navigating the computer from here. So I think that's a wrap for us, Zach.
Yeah.
I think this is, there's a lot of protesting still going on. I'm going to stay here until this goes on, and we will have a lot more of this coverage. Not only this, there's news from Argentina. Javier Milei, candidate extraordinaire, libertarian candidate extraordinaire, has won in Argentina. We also have news from
Milei is
Nicaragua.
going to Congress.
I'm sorry?
So the Libertarian is going to Congress.
Yep.
The
Yes.
Libertarian is going to Argentina's Congress. Congratulations to Javier Milei, Austrian economist, founding member of the Libertarian Party of Argentina. He is going to the parliament. Outstanding.
And so our show on Wednesday, we're also going to have Joe Walsh.
We are going to have former United States Congressman Joe Walsh, former Tea Party congressman, who primaried Donald Trump in the 2020 cycle, or at least attempted to. Very much looking forward to having him on the show, and we hope to have some more detailed updates from Cuba. We still got to go do an end of the day head count, at least on my end, and then on your end, you have to go talk with more Cubans over there in Miami, which I've always called New Cuba. The same way we've got a New Mexico over here in the Southwest, they might as well just rename South Florida as New Cuba, and that would be fine with me.
Only Miami, Zach. Miami can take the name of Little Cuba. Everybody else, I don't think they want that.
Well, Miami would
Wednesday's
obviously be
show,
the
we will
capital city of
expand on
that
all
state.
of these topics. Thank you to everyone who tuned into this special edition of Latin Libertarians.
Have a wonderful night, Martha, and thank you all the libertarians for watching. And by the way, any libertarian running for federal office, one policy that will be real popular with Cuban voters, at least your policy towards Cuba, Uncle Sam should stay the hell out of the way while Cubans do what they got to do. That really is the best policy, instead of getting in their way like right now. Hashtag just saying.